Oh, good gosh, I almost pressed leave meeting. And I kind of like, pop-up button. Okay, so welcome today. I'm Nathalie Tasler, and we're talking about observations. And one way of thinking about observations is that these are a form of looking systematically. But there's much more to it, and today cannot cover all there is to it. But what I try to do is give you a bit of a scaffold, an overview of the different types of observations, the different ways of thinking about observation. But before we start, a little exercise. See, Sarah, sorry, I'm starting right away with the exercise here. So what I would like you to do, considering it's only the four of us, you don't even have to write it down. We can just talk it through. So what I would like you to do, you can see the image clearly, yeah? So is what you see on the painting, can you describe it? And can you describe people's behavior? Started with we are looking at a I would say 17th century Dutch painting. There is what appears to be from the center front to the far horizon what looks like a frozen river. To the left you have a side arm of the river, yeah, so you can see in the mid level of the painting on the right hand side you can see a windmill, and then you can go more into interpretation. So when you look very closely at the front of that image, and this is where like the beach interpretation, Raphael, is probably what you picked up on, is I think that might be a tidal river, because these lines here almost look like tide lines, when the tide is out and you can see where the kelp and so is on the shoreline. So what made you think people are happy, Raphael?
I think especially there are two people
we immediately jump to and then question, well, why did I think those people were happy? What made me think they're skating or ice skating? Because I can actually, when I look closely, they have these funny things on their feet you can see on some people, and it looks maybe like an old-fashioned type of ice skate potentially. So, and it looks like a frozen river because there's no leaves on the trees and it looks white, so that might be frost, and people are dressed in lots and lots of clothes, so it's probably cold outside. So these kind of things you can pay attention to. So it's basically it's a form of paying attention as well. So we've made all assumptions already, and it's a part of it is to really think about what are our assumptions and are there other ways of thinking about it. So I always find this really interesting. In art history, you're taught really in great detail how to describe images and how to look at it. And I always feel it's a nice little exercise when teaching observation to start with, because that brings you really back to what is it you notice before you go into interpreting it or making yourself aware of the interpretation. So, and then, well, I went a little bit rogue because I had a bit of time before the session, and I thought like, whoo, and then I was thinking about observation, and I was thinking how heavily, when we talk about observations, we think about visual stimuli, don't we? We think about looking and what do we see. And so I was thinking, but it's also about paying attention and paying watch, but it's also about listening. So I was thinking, if we want to do classroom observations of our students, maybe we develop an active pedagogy, and where we step back and the students take over a bit more and we watch them. We also listen and we can feel the situation. Can you think of a meeting or a family dinner or something where the social situation was really awkward. Yeah. Okay. When you think about it and pay attention, what's your reaction? Maybe your shoulders rise up a little or go a bit to the front, or maybe you can feel a little twinge in your stomach, or you suddenly can feel your muscles tensing slightly because it was awkward. So sometimes when we are in situations, sometimes our body reacts so to a stimuli before we actually know why am I feeling like this? What's going on here? So that can happen too. And this is when a stimulus comes in before we can interpret what this is about. So we are actually paying attention much more in a teaching observation than just looking or listening, but we may feel warm or cold. The light in the room might be great or it might be horrible. There might be smells, the chairs might be comfortable or uncomfortable. There's so much stuff going on. And when we think about it, these are things to note down, because if we feel them, what do our learners feel in that situation, And all of this can build to rich descriptions. So I need to loop back. When I was going rogue, I started looking up a little bit about stimulus versus perceptions and found a couple of articles you may or may not find interesting to read. They are kind of not full academic articles, but kind of like the Frontiers in Science, or the one is from a university library about communications. But I thought it might be interesting to think about these different processes that are going on while we are observing. So that's why I shared them with you as well. So what we get from all of this, from noticing, from listening, from feeling, and writing it down, is what can be described as thick description. Now, sometimes some authors also call it rich description. You know how it goes in the literature, there's not always a full agreement on all the things. However, so if you want to look up thick description or rich description, look for both terminology and see what the different approaches and opinions on these are. I gave you a link to the Sage reference on thick description, which gives you a little bit of a history of it, and then how it developed and how it's understood at the moment. And this is all available with the library through library login. Yeah, so it's so everything I shared is either open access or you can use it with the university library account. So, okay, are there any comments or questions so far? No? Okay. So, and then there are different types of observations. So we were thinking about, okay, how is it actually being in the field and doing observation? And one of the things, before I talk about the different types of observation, is actually something to pay attention to. Is there's things we can see or notice here, and there are things that are absent. And sometimes the things that are absent in a situation might actually tell you a lot, or as much as the things that are there and that are observable. Does this make sense? What I'm trying to get at is sometimes something is missing or is lacking, or is, there's already a value judgment there. So absence, I stick with absence. So that is something to also pay attention to, because absence of something can be quite meaningful and can give you data as well. So now, different types of observations. So in marketing, for instance, people can use user observation. So there's a little story I was told once by a consultant, and they were looking into, similar to here, where people were given something to cook or to make in a kitchen, because it was a kitchen company and they wanted to know how the workflow in the kitchen works. But then they noticed that every time people used measuring cups, they did that funny squinting thing, where you hold the cup up to see if you have the right level of liquid. And that led to the development of a cup with a little prism in it, so that you can literally look from top and you can see how high the liquid in that measuring cup is. So so user observations is how people interact with something, and you can see it's quite a controlled environment, and there is a very purposeful planning behind that of why you do this observation, what you want to get out of it. So you usually have very clear ideas and sometimes observation matrices, similar to clinical observation here, for instance, where there is a presumed set of things that the person who's doing the observation expects to see or expects to see in a certain way, and then they literally tick boxes or take a note of if that happened this way, yes or no. So there are actually qualitative and quantitative observations. How much you agree with either of those is a completely different story, but I wanted to at least show you these for completion. Then there are laboratory observations. So that's often used also in, for instance, psychological studies, where labs are set up and the people in the lab are given specific topics to talk about, and they're very often filmed and recorded. And then people look at interactions, micro communication, and body language, these kind of things. And then we also have, and you can think about what are the limitations, what are the advantages and disadvantages of these, and how realistic is this for you to undertake in by any means. There is also a different way of thinking about observations, and this is about thinking about observations in a structured or or systematic way. And in this way, you prepare an observation. So you go into a situation and you have certain expectations of the situation. So, and this is a little exercise we're going to do next. So in the next observation, we are watching just a minute or so of reaction of NASA engineers after successful landing. So what do you expect to see? So the engineers are happy. We know that they are happy because it was a successful event. So what do you expect to see in an observation in a situation like this? What expressions of joy might you see, notice?
I think a lot of cheering.
Cheering? What does cheering look like?
Sorry, I'm still here. It's just my connection's horrible.
Yeah,
I think a lot of cheering and smiling.
Smiling?
Jumping even.
Jumping even?
Maybe clapping or like cheering and yeah, just general sort of infectious joy. Like people will be, I imagine, happy to achieve the same thing because they've been working so long on it.
How does infectious joy look like?
I guess people sharing expressions, sort of looking at each other and then, confirming each other's.
So nodding, smiling.
Yeah, and sort of turning to each other and.
Yeah, or like Raphael said, maybe even jumping about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what they do. Let's see if this works.
17 meters, standing by for touchdown.
Can you hear?
Touchdown confirmed.
So we did see clapping. There was a bit of jumping about. What else did you notice?
Dancing.
Dancing. What else did you notice?
Well, you can clearly see they're very happy.
How can you clearly see that?
They're smiling, laughing.
And did you notice the little fist bump? Did you notice that these people here doing the little fist bump movement? Did you notice something else?
They're all wearing the same uniform because they're working for the same people.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite interesting because sometimes in a lab or that kind of situation, I wouldn't imagine everybody be dressed the same, but it's NASA, so they have a uniform.
You notice one thing everyone did. I only need to play the beginning again. Let's see.
Get up.
Yes, that's it. They all jumped up. So there was this energy. Yeah? Everyone jumped up. Exactly. And now you can start, thinking about, okay, you may be wanting to count the clapping or the laughing, or did really everyone jump up? And then you might want to think about, okay, why did everyone jump up? You can be happy sitting down. So what made it, what makes people go, woo, and have that. And this can tell you, this can tell you a lot as well. And to think about, okay, so what actually makes us do that? And also human interactions is quite culture dependent as well. So, so if everyone behaves in the same way, you can start theorizing or thinking about interpreting, well, why are they all, why are all of them jumping up? Why are all of them clapping or laughing? And would that be the case in any of these situations, or is there something that is specific to that situation in the room? And there were clearly two of the engineers who had a thing with the hand, with the fist bumping hand movement. So there was clearly something going on there. So what's going on there? Why is it only two people who are doing that? And so there are lots of different things that can come out of these observations. But if we, in our field notes, only write down everyone was really happy, we lose that thick description. So it's really about making sure when we do observations to write down exactly what happened. That's why I was a bit a pain in the neck, Raphael, and keep asking, well, why are they happy? What is it that made you notice they are happy? Because that is already your value judgment. That's already your interpretation to say, oh, they were all super happy. You're still with me? Yeah, good. This would be a systemic or a structured observation, because we knew we are going to observe a situation where we expect to see joy or a celebration or happiness. So, and we determined beforehand what might be the things we are expecting to see. So that introduces a certain bias in our observations, because what we expect to see and what we see influences quite often what we notice and what we see. And this is something to pay attention to, particularly if we are observing our own students, because of that expectation bias, if we are in a situation and if we see something. So so this is where maybe having someone else observe, or having two people together observe, or being very, very vigilant with writing down the details of what we notice before we write down what we interpret. And it can be really exhausting. I did this, for instance, in my ethnographic study. Sometimes you're so tired and you just write down your interpretation, and then you go, wait a moment, you need to backpedal a little, because it can be a little bit tedious to actually say, well, they were obviously happy, So no, the point is to notice this, and to notice if someone maybe wasn't smiling, or if someone wasn't jumping up, or if someone did something different than everyone else. So to not have that immediate interpretation override come into our note taking, because that then is more difficult to reconstruct. Yeah. Then we have naturalistic observations or unstructured observations. So this is a situation where we don't know we are going really into. So this is a student presentation, and I only show you, half a minute to just see what you notice. And here we don't know yet. Wait a moment, can you? Sorry, I was a bit out of whack here with my slides. So this is something where we go into a situation and we have no expectations of that situation, or no expectations in terms of, oh, these people are going to be happy or these people are going to be upset. Now, is this entirely right, what I say right now? What do you think?
Well, if there's students doing a presentation, we have seen students doing a presentation in the past, so we're probably thinking, oh, they're going to be acting in a certain way, or pretending to be confident and professional, or whatever it is, the subject they're studying, and they should be displaying the knowledge. Like, we don't know if it's a formative assessment or not, but usually if people are asked to stand up and do a presentation, some people will like it and some people won't.
Exactly. Raphael, did you want to add something, or did you just switch your camera?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question because my internet was horrible. I apologize.
No worries at all. I was just asking because the next bit is a naturalistic or an unstructured observation, and in this case we wouldn't make assumptions or a list of things we want to see. And what I basically just was highlighting, and Alison confirmed, is that we do already have assumptions unless we are going into a completely unfamiliar situation. We kind of sort of know that there will be students who are really nervous. We kind of sort of know there will be students who really shine in presenting and who like to be on stage and share. And so we do have a rough idea of what's going to come. And so that, again, this influences how we look at the situation, right? So I'll play a little bit, and I'm curious to see what you notice.
17 systems together, we have about 900 seconds between failures. This means that
wait a moment, it was a little bit too
conclusions and guidelines for the design of PV systems can be defined. Thank you, and we're happy to answer your questions.
So a couple things. First of all, you ended exactly at 15 minutes. I find that additionally, just sorry, can you repeat what exactly a failure mode is defined as? Are you looking at 6% intermittency varying from second to second? So if you look at the output from 1 second to the next, does that change by over 6%? Okay, it wasn't averaged out over an hour.
No.
So you got
it was 6% second by second.
You got the 6% from Cal ISO.
Yeah, we said that if in a given hour, we measured. Yeah, they only give hourly data. So the difference between the actual demand and the hour-ahead demand forecast. So this is what the.
So did you notice anything? I kind of see if I can scroll back. Did you notice anything in that very short excerpt of the presentation? What are the things maybe that you observe?
There seems to be one person who's taking a lead, but our teammates are actually listening, because like people were nodding or like looking at her. So it seems like they've appointed a spokesperson, but maybe they have worked as a team for it.
Yeah, it's also really what I also thought was really interesting. I don't know, can you see this? The body language is quite interesting. Some people like this and some people having the arms back, and I think we do make judgments about body language really easily. And so some person we might immediately perceive as confident, another person we might immediately perceive as maybe being nervous based on their body language. And that is not, this can be correct, but it doesn't necessarily need to be correct, because there's all kinds of things. So for instance, the person to the very left with the arms behind their back, so if you believe some resources, that might be a position of confidence because you're opening yourself up. However, when you look closely, does she look very confident to you when you look at her face expression or everything else? So there are all kinds of things we make assumptions about. And so again, is that where the note-taking is really important, to say, you know, how were they positioned to one another? And as you said that, you know, they were nodding, they were looking at the presenting person, so that shows support, that shows involvement. I'm really good in masking. I have ADHD. I can nod and look as if I listen to you, while in my head I'm planning my next sewing project. So do you know what I mean? So we do make a lot of these assumptions, and at sometimes there is not necessarily much we can do in terms of understanding what's going on inside someone when we see the body language. However, I just wanted to point that situation out because of our experience as educators and having seen students presented many times, there are certain stereotypes or patterns of presenters we have formed, and it's so easy to, you know what I mean, to overlay these onto what we are observing. And this is sometimes where observations are really valuable, but if you have observation as the only data source, it can become a bit tricky, because it relies very much on what we think we observed, what we think we noticed. And I think this is where when you're using observation, it might be useful to include other data points as well. Does this make sense? So it can give you rich data, and it can be quite funny and exciting. I had a very funny self-observation with a student once. So I was teaching presentation skills and filmed the students, and one of the students watched the film back and shouted out, "Oh my gosh, I'm a beard stroker." So he had a beard, and when he was thinking, he was always doing this, and he wasn't aware of it. And so it can be really valuable, and it can be a really rich source of data. I just wanted to highlight like the impact our interpretation always has on observations. So we've looked at observation in terms of how it's structured. Yeah, if it's oh, I just realized that image moves. Was not aware that this happened. I just moved this aside a little bit. So I was looking at we were looking at different types of observation in terms of how it's set up, in terms of structured or unstructured. There is yet another way of thinking about observations, and this is a whole spectrum of participant observation where you're a complete participant to complete observer. So complete participant, you are literally in that situation, acting and interacting with everyone else while you're observing. And the opposite end of that is a complete observer. And in some sources, the complete observer is described as not even known to the people observed, that they are being observed and in a situation of being observed. That comes with a whole host of ethical questions. But I wanted to highlight these differences as well. So you've noticed now we have 3 different ways by which we can classify observations. And this is why, I just wanted to provide a brief overview, because there's no way I can cover all of this in depth. I would stop sharing. I've added a couple of resources in this way, and I think, Sarah, you add this way underneath the video so people can have a look and follow links. But